Hi, Marius from Evri, and I'm the head of UX at Evri currently, but that wasn't where I started. So I'll take you on a little journey that we've been on, and this is me and my team and what we've tried to do over the last 4 years or so. So to start off, I thought it's good to sort of visualize our journey through the medium of expressive dance. There's a lovely soundtrack, which you're obviously not hearing. So what this chap is so beautifully illustrating feels like what our journey at Evri has been like to try and reach UX maturity. There's sort of graceful moments where you're ascending up the stairs and then some invisible bastard just push you off. So, and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. Oh, that's a transformation project right there. Oh, that's the rebrand. Okay, oh, we're rebounding. Oh, that was product first go, product second go. So this chap eventually gets back to the top of that staircase. So if you're a Norman Nielsen fan, that's probably level 6 of maturity. Now, spoiler alert, we're still halfway up that staircase. So after 5 years of hard graft, there's not a particular area in our business that we can say that is fully UX mature. And the really interesting thing about our business is, depending on the division, that level of maturity, the level of research that we do, our level of influence differs. And so I'll give you a little bit of a run through in a moment of that. But look at him, he's almost at the top. He's back, he's gonna do it. Almost, and he's there. Well, you get the idea. Does that feel like anybody else's UX journey? Does that feel familiar? So before I go into some of the details, it's probably worth giving a short history of Evri. So Evri started the year before I was born. That is how old I am, and that is how outdated my profile picture is that you saw on that presentation. But the genesis of the company was really in mail order. So Graton was a mail order business, and delivery started with the execs' wives getting in their cars, popping parcels in their boots and going out and delivering them. So this was in the glory days when people expected a delivery to take 28 to 60 days, depending on what you ordered. From there, the company started growing, took on a little bit more business. So Next Directory launched, they got that in. There was another company called Freeman's, also a mail order company that they started picking work up for. So Graton and Freeman started expanding, taking on more retail clients. And eventually it launched as a standalone delivery company called ParcelNet around about 1999. So at this point, very much focused on serving retailers. So the first thing they did online, which was visible to customers, was actually introducing tracking in 2004. In 2008, it was acquired by Hermes, much loved brand who nobody has anything bad to say about. So Hermes is a global brand. It exists in 8 European markets, and obviously what we now know as Evri was the UK division of that. So it was only in 2010 that Hermes actually launched any customer-facing products. So up until that point, it was all retailer-driven. Customer services was handled by the retailer. Obviously, there were some channels internally. So customers disputed with the retailer contacted us, we tried to resolve it. But this also sort of gives you an indication of the level of customer centricity at the company. It was never customer-centric up until this point. It was client-centric. So we sell our product to retailers. They keep their customers happy with it. So it was only really at that point that the company started thinking about things like websites and maybe doing customer services beyond just retailers. But one of the constraints of the company was that all of the technology was running out of Germany. So Hermes Europe, based in Hamburg, is where all the tech was sit. So the local company was growing really well from a volume perspective, but it didn't have any flexibility in its tech. It didn't have any flexibility in the way it designed websites, or pretty much anything that had to do with digital. It had to go through Germany, get approved, get in a line. So in 2017, the company embarked on this project called Digital Futures. So Digital Futures was sort of twofold. It was extracting the technology out of Hamburg and setting up their own tech infrastructure, going cloud-based with it. But it was also a little bit of a rebrand, a reinvigoration. So the company realized it had some reputational issues to resolve, but it also understood that it had a lot of product potential, which was being completely untapped. Up until that point, they only did standard delivery, so it was 3 to 5 day delivery periods. So big project, massive CapEx budget around it, and really tight deadlines. So only in 2019 that we started establishing an internal UX team. So there'd been some UX designers before, maybe one odd guy here or there, never lasted very long. So by the time I joined in 2019, as part of this Digital Futures project, there was an agency doing all of these big redesign projects. And we'll get back to how that went a little bit later. So more recently, the company was acquired by Advent, a venture capital company. And obviously, under contractual terms, we had to rebrand. We could no longer use the Hermes name in a consumer-facing way, and that came out in 2020. So brief history. So some of those sideline elements will become a little bit important when we talk about some of our challenges. But so when I started, the big question was, where's our seat at the table? Now, image shows you the seat at the table was on the other side of the planet relative to where we were. And one of the challenges that we faced is that our exec didn't really understand UX. They wanted to be customer-centric, they wanted to do great things, but they didn't really understand how that entire project worked. And so the agency who was working for the company at the time, great at strategy, great at research, not that magnificent on execution. So by the time I arrived, the company was in the middle of this digital futures transformation, very much deadline driven. We have to deliver, we have to deliver. That entire design process was owned by a head of change management. So she used to go to the agency, who would give her a stack of desktop designs, even though 80% of our traffic's mobile. She would take the desktop designs to the exec. They would go, magnificent, add that paragraph in there, move that button. Can we make that thing over there green? So that was the design process that I walked into at Hermes at the time. And needless to say, little old me, unknown to all of these people, when I started asking some questions like, why are these journeys broken? Why is the tech looking really, really bad? Because it was me and one other front-end developer who formed the UX team at the moment. We were sort of just dismissed and gone, look, don't worry, let's just get it out. We'll come back and fix it later. Put up your hand if somebody in your business has ever told you that. 1, 2, 3, the rest of you are extremely lucky if it's never happened to you. So, big project going on. We didn't really have a voice. We had no influence. So what did we do? We feasted on crumbs, and I kid you not, that was the actual first UX strategy, was feast on crumbs. So we had this big moving project that we knew we weren't going to influence. But we decided somewhere in this company there must be somehow we can make ourselves useful. And so obviously we observed what this agency was doing, the way they were working. And while all of that was going on, we were under the hood. We were testing the crap out of those journeys. Sorry, I'm being recorded, shouldn't swear. We were checking out how the technology was fitting together. We were looking at how they're setting up the data, and it was all really badly. But we needed to find an ally who was going to entrust us with a project. So there was one disgruntled member of our senior management who looks after our business accounts. So he'd been given some really high-level wireframes. His project had been put on hold for 3 months while the agency was working on other stuff. And he was looking for a friend. He was looking for somebody to help him because nobody else was, and we swooped in on that. So we looked at what our competitors were doing. So we were competing against an agency to do design in our own business. But we looked at what they were doing and all of the weaknesses in what they were doing, and we decided, right, we can be a lot faster, we can be better, and we can do some basics that they're not. So we dove in, we did a really rapid design cycle on a new platform for him, and it was sort of a desktop-based platform for his microshippers. But what we did differently was we spoke to the users, we started interviewing them, we understood what their problems were with the current platforms. We created an entire design prototype that we tested with them. And what we then did is created a 3-minute video of the functionality we're proposing, of the user's response to that, and we armed our business stakeholder to take that to the executive committee. So up until that point, they'd never seen anything like that. So it was a completely new way of approaching things. In 3 minutes, we told them the entire story. We showed them how the users reacted to it. So it was really powerful in the context of how they've been looking at desktop pages up until now. So that really blew people away. What the business really appreciated is with that particular project, we drove down design cost by 2,000%. So our exec maybe didn't speak UX, but they speak bottom line, and that was pretty impressive for them, and that's when we started adding more people. So this is where we started punching above our weight. Now, before I go into this topic, I want you to look at that picture. So this is generated by DALL-E. Look at the people in the background. Do you see the zombie apocalypse taking place behind these people? Maybe if you're sitting in the back, you're not too fussed. But when I first looked at this, I thought, okay, so AI is a threat. It's not that big a threat yet because this woman's doesn't have a hand. That one's face is all skewed. That one's got two heads. I thought, why is it doing this? It's just not very good. And then I realized what's actually happening is DALL-E was tapping into my inner anxiety of what this period represented, because that kind of felt like what we were up against, the zombie apocalypse. But our next step was really to take all of that knowledge, all of that data that we'd been looking at in the prior 3 months and go back to the exec and go, right, so the agency's built this thing for you, you want to release it. What we would like to do for you is just A/B test it before you take it out to make sure it's going to convert at the same rate. Because lo and behold, the agency didn't look at data, they didn't look at analytics, they weren't actually aware of what the previous website was delivering, and they didn't bring any of that into their own design work. So we knew it was going to tank because we'd already done the work, we'd already done a conversion testing on it. And so when we told the exec that if they switch this website on, their conversion is going to tank by 60%, their revenue is going to drop by 60%. They suddenly started taking us very seriously, and they started investing quite heavily in UX. So we had proven that we can do a better job internally, we can do it faster, and we showed by using data and research that we were a lot more astute at tapping into what the business wants to achieve and delivering against user experience at the same time, which brought us into a glorious period of double diamonds for everyone. So the company invested really heavily in UX. We scaled up both developers and designers, and we implemented the basic double diamond formula. Look at the data, look at the analytics, use observational recording tools to see if we can sort of see what's going on, where funnels are tanking, created hypotheses on the back of that, did lots of user testing, created designs, and because we had the front-end developers as well, we could take it from research right to delivery. So we systematically started redesigning all the stuff the agency did and completed all of the work that they didn't finish. So that was a big shifting point and a big win for us. So suddenly we were the new rock stars in the business. Everybody loved what we're doing. And then it was time for transformation. So if any of you have been through transformations, they can be glorious things. They can also be extremely painful. So we went through our first transformation when our new shareholders came in. So Advent did their due diligence and very astutely learned that one of the Achilles heels of the old Hermes was that we committed to doing a lot, but we didn't deliver a lot. So focus on trying to do too many things, delivered far too little. So Advent wanted to reinvent the way we do product development, specifically at Evri. And part of that was massively expanding our engineering capacity and bringing in a much more structured way of doing technology. So they brought in a process called ITOM, Information Technology Operational Management. So on paper, ITOM is beautiful. It is very similar to the double diamond. It is effectively saying, we've got this beautiful hopper. All of our ideas go into the top. We do quick validation and discovery. Is this worth pursuing? If it comes out the other side and we go, yes, let's do this, some of them will go into inception. So it's effectively taking all of the ideas, sorting them out, and only taking on the things that are worthwhile. So far, so good. Engineering team expanded threefold. UX design did not. So the floodgates opened, and that funnel essentially just turned into a big cylinder because everything that went into discovery went into inception, went into build. So our team of designers were very busy trying to do 60 discoveries at the same time, followed by 60 inceptions at the same time. So needless to say, ITOM set us as a UX team back a little bit. We became a feature factory. After that, we were launching into our rebrand. So another glorious chapter, and some of the amazing people who helped us pull that one off aren't here this evening. Otherwise, I would have thanked them again in person. Oh, she is. She's right over there. She's hiding. So just to give you a little bit of context, when we went through this rebrand exercise, our marketing folk engaged a very expensive agency in London who did some beautiful concepts, came up with the name Evri, came up with big concepts that looked fabulous on posters, on trucks, on buildings. That got sold to our exec, and so when the UX team were briefed on what our new brand is going to look like, we got a single screen desktop with the word send on it and 3 input fields. And we were told we are now a typographic brand. Our brand colors are blue, blue and white. No more photos, no more illustrations, and can we please use white text on blue throughout? So that was a fun game. Our team managed to pull it off beautifully, but again, we were a little bit opportunistic here. So we had this massive job, incredibly tight timelines, but this was also the opportunity that we decided to build a brand new design system. So it was necessary because we had to work at pace, we had to create consistency in everything that we did, but we also had to replicate that in our engineering side by building a component library to go with it. So a massive, massive project. While we were doing that, the company started their transition towards product-centric ways of working. So the company at that point went, right, in order to increase our value, in order to become much more agile, we need to stop being very much waterfall, we need to be much more product-centric, we need to be much more focused on driving value in a very iterative way. So that sort of brings us to where we are today. So even that transformation had 1 or 2 false starts, but this year we've really pulled it forward and it's starting to make a big difference for how we do UX as well. So I mentioned earlier that we've got different divisions within the company, each of them on a very different place. We work in different ways with each of them. So the 4 core areas we work with is e-com, customer, courier, and then project. So I'll give you a quick rundown. Across e-com, customer, and courier, we now have embedded UX teams, so they work with their product teams on a day-to-day basis. Project, we sort of lean in and out, although next year we are creating a new shared services team, because what we did find is by just embedding all of our teams in those product areas, we lost a bit of our flexibility to do strategic and tactical work. So project will go to our shared services team next year. So if we look at what the core business drivers are in each of these areas, they are quite different. So for our e-com team, it is all about growth. For our customer team, it is about reputation management. For couriers, it's about compliance. And then our project teams tend to be quite tactical. It's bringing in new tech, it's bringing in new providers. So no consistent focus there. It is a drop and go project approach to things. So if we look at the different measures that are important for each of these things, as you can imagine, for e-com, it's things like volume, conversion, basket value, and retention rates. For our customer areas, it's net promoter scores, CSATs, number of queries, and number of claims that we get from customers. Obviously, you want those first 2 to be quite high, and you want the bottom 2 to be quite low. On the courier side, that's our most important contact point. That is the doorstep experience. That is fulfilling the thing that the customer wants us to do with their parcel. So there's a lot of focus on compliance metrics. So first on delivery success, delivering within service level agreements, ETAs being met, and then obviously courier star rating. So that is our customers actually rating our couriers for each of their deliveries on a scale of 1 to 5. For project, it varies. We don't have fixed KPIs. We don't necessarily have measures. It does change quite dramatically from project to project. So if we then look at data sophistication, so I talked earlier about how we used analytics very specifically, insight to drive some change. Evri is a very data-rich company, but our sophistication varies from area to area. So as is the case with a lot of company with legacy systems, our data is very siloed. And so what we're busy focusing on is building those connections, cross-referencing, so we can better understand the context of all of the data that we've got. But you see different levels of sophistication based on the area. So for e-com, they are very much a much more sophisticated outfit. They are looking at financial data. They are much more on the analytics side of things. They use regression testing to determine when customers are going to start leaving us, to be quite honest, so that they can intervene and sort of manage those churn rates. On the customer side, I would say it's sort of medium. So we've got a lot of data sources, but they're not all linked together. So we still need to do a lot of that manual patching up of stuff. On the courier side, we've got a lot of operational data, so we know exactly what's happening to the parcels, but we can't track courier behavior across our apps and websites to the same level. So we do get some of that, basic analytics data, but we can't track individual behavior just yet. So not necessarily valuable data from a user behavior and design perspective. And then if we look at the department cultures, they're quite different as well. So our e-com team is quite aggressive, and what I mean is not street brawlers, but they're obviously very much focused on growth, and that is through platform expansion, partnerships, integrations. So they'll always go, go, go. They don't have time to wait for research. Have you heard that one before? So we always need to be ahead of the game when it comes to our e-com team. In customers, it's a bit more of a consultative area because there's crossover in so many different areas of it. And then in the courier side of it, it's a very reactive and directive part of the business. So obviously these are the guys that keep the plate spinning. If something goes wrong, they want it fixed really quickly. Because they work with such a large courier pool, they also tend to be really directive and restrictive. So they are not about empowerment, they are about restricting control. And then project, they are done and gone. They are about delivering a project and doing those tick box exercises and getting on to the next one. So if we start thinking about what is the role of UX in each of these areas, so I would say in e-com it's medium low. We used to be a lot more in charge, but it was focused on building our own websites and interfaces and optimizing our journeys. At the moment, it is more focused on things like our partnerships with the post office, our integrations with places like Vinted and TikTok. So at the moment, our influence there is a little bit lower from a business strategy perspective than it used to be. In customer, on the flip side of that coin, is quite high right now. So we have been extensively involved in this year's customer strategy planning, which we presented to our CEO along our product colleagues yesterday. It's an area where we've now done big segmentation studies, big foundational work. So interestingly, I talked about this earlier, our company's always been very much client-orientated. So we understand our retailers really well, but we don't actually know who our end customers were. We didn't until this year. So I've done a massive segmentation study and really focused our product roadmaps for next year based on tapping into the needs of those individual markets and prioritizing them. Obviously within that, focus on disabled customers and accessibility is quite a big focus point for us next year. On the courier side, our influence from a business strategy perspective is quite low. And we'll talk about that in a bit more. And then there's the next layer down, which is product strategy. So obviously, any of you who have done any kind of strategy work will know that, when you're at the services level, you're probably 2 or 3 tiers down on that strategy hierarchy, and your focus really needs to be on influencing upwards, which is what we're trying to do with data and research. But if we then look at product strategy, so for me, the differentiation between business strategy and product strategy is business is about where we're going to play as a business, what are the new markets we're going to enter, what are the new opportunities we're going to pursue. For product, it's more orientated on what are the outcomes that we want to achieve and what are the problems that are preventing us from getting those outcomes. And then obviously UX role is how do we actually solve those problems? So how do we change user behavior? So at the moment, our upward influence on the product strategy has improved quite a lot over the last year. So I would say the e-com, it is sort of medium. Customer, it is relatively high. And in Korea, it's still medium low. We're still doing a lot of mitigation work down there. Ways of working, little joke there. E-com is probably the closest thing to agile that we've got, simply because they're less dependent on some of the other systems. But if I'm perfectly honest, no area in our business has truly reached agile ability simply because of the way our tech is structured. So there's always a lot of independencies. But if we think about getting into sprint rhythms, being able to focus on 2-week chunks of work, focusing on releases, they're probably furthest ahead. Customer I would call agile. So we want to be agile, but it's all still waterfall. We have to plan ahead. Those roadmaps are suggestions, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I think Korea I would call fragile. So Korea is a really interesting place as UX designers. It is one of the most important to us because we really care about the well-being of those couriers. But there's a lot of directional shift. I spoke earlier about it's a reactive, directive part of the business. So there's a lot of stop, go, stop, go. So, what does our Insight program look like? Now, I'll tell you a little joke. My background used to be research and insight. So I worked in media and publishing, worked in audience measurement systems and consumer research. And when I changed career to UX, it was because I wanted to get away from research. I was tired of people looking at research and not using it. I wanted to get back to my design roots, design stuff, you know, apply the learnings that we want to do. What is 80% of our maturity driven by? It's driven by research. So these are sort of the things that we're involved in. So obviously there's analytics, A/B testing, experimentation, quant research, qualitative research, user testing, ethnography. That is a boast. We do diary studies. It's not full ethnography. Segmentation and persona, continuous research and design sprints. So let's see how these fall out across the different areas of our business. So if you look at e-com, sort of mentioned earlier, very much driven by conversion rate, growth, volume, lower tolerance for waiting for research to come back, although they do use it strategically. So you can see the things that we do there tend to be very much focused around data. So it is analytics, it's funnels, it's A/B testing and experimentation. Those are the key things that we use to shape our experiences. In the customer side, you'll see a lower usage of data, but we are quite high up on the scale of using quantitative and qualitative research to drive our understanding of those audiences. So we do have those data elements, but research has been incredibly important to us to sort of make the links between what the data is telling us and understanding why consumers are behaving in a certain way or quite unhappy about things. So segmentation and persona usage, you'll see sort of towards the bottom there, medium, low. And that's simply because it's a very new thing in our company. So surprisingly, when I arrived, there was no segmentation. There was a little bit of that going on in our e-com space, but we didn't do that in customer. People didn't focus on persona usage. So this year, with the help of our new product owner who's really passionate about customer understanding, we've implemented these. We're developing it in all areas. And then most recently, we've started doing design sprints as well. So we've taken all of this data, we take it into 1 week design sprints where we take something from problem statement to concept that we actually test with user. And that work was actually sort of center stage to the strategy work that we presented to our CEO yesterday. And then if we look at Korea, you can see data usage as an influencer is really low, but quantitative research and user testing is extremely high. So, as I mentioned earlier, in that part of the business, they are very clear about what they want. So largely we have to try and shift and influence as we're designing. So it is probably one of the most prolific areas where we are doing user testing or usability testing rather. So every single feature that we do try and do an element of qual, try and understand what the user needs are, and then we'll do another layer of validation by actually getting them to test those things as well. It's also one of the few areas where we actually do a lot more in-depth quals. So what we're trying to get to is get like a full understanding of what a day in the life of these couriers look like. So not only on the interfaces that they're using, but before they start their day, what's going on in their lives, what's going on in their mind, and then how does that sort of transition through our processes and our tools and our systems as they progress through the day, getting to a DU, getting into their car, doing the deliveries, and then their end-of-day tasks as well. So this is another area where we also did a little bit of an experiment with continuous research. So because it's such an active area of the business, it was critical for us to build up a portfolio of research, and we use Dovetail as our repository now. So everything we do gets dumped in there, and it's just helped us to be really agile and really quick in responding to anything that comes through the business. So we can go, oh yes, you want to do that, here's some insight around it. So last year we did quite a bit of continuous research in there. So we were interviewing couriers every single week, whether we had a topic or product to talk to them about or not. So project, really low maturity across the board. We do some A/B testing on release in most of these areas. Historically, that's what our entire workload looked like. It was all project-based. We do still do some quantitative research here, so really to understand market potential, is this something people want? And then we'll do a little bit of qualitative and user testing as well. All of that is not really driven by the business, it's driven by the user experience designers who are really passionate about trying to get stuff to work for our users. So that's me, and that's the journey that we've been on. So I was having a conversation to somebody earlier. you know, he asked me, what does my day look like? And I said, well, largely I feel like a character from House of Cards, because I leave the design and the research to the talented team who I work with. And I mainly deal with the political wrangling. And, you know, the reality is nobody's going to give you that seat at the table. You do have to go and knock down some doors, and you have to be tactical, and you have to be clever. You have to outbox the competition, whoever that may be in your business. I'm sure there are some people who work in truly user-centric organizations. That's not me. But, you know, it's incredibly important to learn to speak the business language. We all have a tendency to be those UX evangelists, talk about what the user wants, and that is great. But you always have to translate that for your stakeholders. What does it mean for the business? What does user failure mean for the business? What does it mean if you don't get it right? And if you can't express it in terms of business impact, you are probably going to lose every argument that you have with people when you try and get stuff done for the user. You have to be a servant to the business. We hate this bit because, you know, we're all about the user. We want to improve the user lives. We want to make things better. But ultimately, you have to leverage the things that the business wants. You have to have a level of empathy for the business wants to achieve as well and guide them towards the light. But always be a double agent for the user. Sneak in the good stuff in between the things that you have to do for the business. So we've been fortunate. We've had a couple of bursts where we had budgets to improve things for the user. Those are few and far between, so you have to constantly be thinking, how can I do some good stuff for the user? How can I get some good stuff for the users? And you have to pick your battles. There are going to be times where you're not going to get anything in. You always need to have a sacrificial lamb ready as well. So what I mean by that is when you present something to the business, try and get the thing that the business done in there. Try and line up 3 or 4 things for the user. Be really sure about which one is non-negotiable and let go of the others if you have to sacrifice something. You will never, ever be given enough time for research, so always be researching. The only constant in business is change. So, you know, we've had some tremendous breakthroughs, we've had some tremendous breakdowns. We've never had an easy road, and as much as people like us, including our CEO, he's one of our biggest fans, you know, you are never on the front foot. You're always going to have to compete in your business. You are always going to have to advocate for the user and make things work for them. But ultimately, it comes down to keep chipping away at the mountain. Sometimes you're going to be on top, sometimes you're going to be at the bottom, but you have to just keep on chipping away at it and keep focused on doing better things for your users. And that's me.